Um, my name is Chuck Zalanis, and I'm a beverage technology consultant with Heartland Computers. I have Jay Blinderman from Vocalect by Honeywell, and he's going to go through what beverage distributors are using, when it comes to voice pick technology. This is also sponsored by Mountain Leverage, and our key contact there is Alex Renneman. So with that, I've got 25 years of experience as running a Miller beer wholesaler. Had about 125 routes a day that went out of 3 warehouses, and we delivered to over 3,500 accounts on a daily basis. For the past 10 years, since the Miller Coors consolidation that we did in Colorado, I've been working as a beverage technology consultant for Heartland Computers, and I deal with mostly Miller Coors and Budweiser distributors across the country. The goal here is really being smart and using technology to take costs out of the system, bring you a faster ROI. And today what I want to do is have Jay talk to you about voice picking and how it'll benefit your distributorship and how it's scalable. So I'm going to take it over, Jay. Let you take it over, Jay.
Okay. Thanks very much, Chuck. And once again, I'm Jay Blinderman, and I'm with Vocalect. I've been with the company this is my 8th year, but prior to working for Vocalect, I actually did quite a few stints in the technology world, but I've actually come from industry, so to speak. I had about 10 plus years in the supermarket retail industry, also spent some time with Nestle as well as Coca-Cola. So I've got a little bit of this distribution in my background, so I've experienced a lot of these things we're going to talk about on a first-hand basis. So let me tell you a little bit about Vocalect by Honeywell and just about the value proposition of the company. So when Vocalect approaches things, we've got kind of 3 things we probably look at when we're working with customers like yourselves. First thing is we want to learn as much as we can about your operation and about your processes and understand why you do the things you do today and figure out if there's anything we can help you to do those things more effectively or more efficiently. Second thing is we want to make sure that whatever solutions we provide you are sound business practices. And so our approach oftentimes is from an ergonomic perspective, because we want to make sure the worker in your enterprise has the best possible experience. And I'll be able to show you some information about why that's so important to you. That's not typically how people think about things when they think about doing something new in their DC, but I can show you what the rewards will be if you think about the ergonomics of the solution you provide as part of your process. Then the third thing is, we want to make sure that after we've understood your process and can provide you some solutions, that part of those solutions include information that you need to make the best possible business decisions. So those are the 3 things that go into our typical process. Now, as I mentioned, we're Vocalect by Honeywell. That's a little bit of a new twist in that Honeywell acquired us last fall of 2013. We're still going through that transition as we speak. But we've got the entire depth and breadth of the Honeywell organization to help support Vocalect, so we're very excited about that. From a Vocalect perspective, there's over almost 1 million users on a global basis using Vocalect today, and every single day those customers move about $20 billion or have saved about $20 billion by using Vocalect across the 60 or so countries where Vocalect's been deployed. It's also been deployed in 35 or so languages, and then we ourselves have a global team that support people like Chuck and Alex Renneman from Mountain Leverage. There's about 2,000 of us on a global basis that make up Vocalect. But what I wanted to do is focus more on what you experience in the beverage industry. And Chuck talked a little bit about the fact that he came from industry. I've come from industry as well. I think what's important for everybody on the call today to understand is that for the last probably 7 or 8 years I've been with Vocalect, we've had at least 20 net new customers a year from the beer, wine, spirits, carbonated beverage industry convert from whatever they were doing process-wise to a Vocalect-driven system. And these are typically the reasons they tell us they've done that. And these will probably resonate pretty well with you as well. So the number one thing is they're looking for ways to cut costs. That's one of their biggest challenges. I'm sure you're faced with the same kind of challenges. Second thing they're looking for is a way to provide the highest possible level of customer service they can provide. So you might ask yourself, well, what does that have to do with voice? And you'll find out in a moment it has everything to do with voice, because people who are able to move from a paper pick system or even an RF-based pick system can significantly reduce the amount of errors they make and can also speed the process. So the error reduction part's obvious. Obviously, you're going to have happier customers if you're always providing them with the right product. And then secondarily, if you can always provide it on time, they're going to be pretty happy with you as well. The other thing that people tell us about is that they're having to deal with an increase in the number of SKUs. So, craft beers the last 4 or 5 years have just grown tremendously. That seems to be where the most amount of growth is in the U.S. Beer market, is in the crafts. And most of our customers have told us their SKU counts have gone up anywhere from 25 to 50%. So when you go to a solution like VocalElect, we can show you the flexibility of that system will help you meet those new needs and new requirements in terms of dealing with new SKUs. The final thing is that in the beer wine industry, people have told us that the employee turnover rate and or the time needed to train new people has become quite significant. So we'll talk about how voice can help you in that area as well. So let's start off with talking about how does voice work. So the very first thing is, in order for it to work, at a minimum, you have to have some kind of host system that can identify where all the products are in your warehouse. Second part of that is you need some kind of wireless network inside of your warehouse. So it can be 802.11. We don't care necessarily if it's A, B, G, or N, because our system works with all those. But as long as you have that, you're good to go. So in terms of the basics, what happens is your WMS or ERP is going to transmit through the wireless network platform an assignment of data, which the worker is going to hear as being audible commands. So the user provides spoken responses to those commands to confirm that they've actually done something. We use something called the check digit for accuracy, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Whatever they speak is translated back into data, back through the system, and it's transmitted through the voice-enabled platform, once again through the wireless network. And then some way, either in real time or in near real time, that data goes back up to the host system and is recorded and is amended. So real quick on the check digits before I move on to the next slide, there's a couple of different ways you can do that. One way is that if you have a physical slot location in your warehouse, to the right or the left of that location, you'll typically have a 2 to 3 digit numeric number. So what happens in the case of this photo down below is the worker sent to a location, and then they're asked to read a check digit. And then that's what they confirm back. So let me go a little bit into the dialogue of how that works. So a worker sent to an aisle, so they hear in their headset, aisle 25, the worker responds by saying ready. Then they're told to go to a slot location on aisle 25. In this case, it's 414. When they get to 414, there's probably going to be a label to the right of that location sticker. In this case, it's going to be 287. So the worker's going to say just that, 287. That confirms that they really are in front of slot 414. Once they've confirmed it by saying 287, the system then tells them to pick 2. The worker responds by saying 2, or they can respond by saying next, and then they'll be given their next assignment. So that's a little bit of the basic on how the voice dialogue actually works. Now, talked a little bit about voice. Let me back up a step, because most of the people in the beer wine industry today are probably using either paper or labels or a combination of both. So what I'm going to do is help you understand what the differences are between using paper and labels as compared to voice. So if you're using a paper pick system today, you obviously have to go pick up those labels or pick up that paper pick list from somewhere, and then you had some travel time. In the world of voice, those two things are actually condensed down into one step, because the worker is going to be given a mobile computer and that headset you saw from the photo before, and when they log into the system, they're actually going to begin to travel to the location. Now, in a paper system across the top, they then have to read the label or the list. They then have to, as I said before, walk to that location. Once they get there, they have to actually figure out that they're in the right place. So they're either going to remove a label or locate a pen or a pencil to check something off on the pick list to indicate that they've done it. And of course, there's the picking process itself. In the case of voice, those 3 activities are condensed down once again into one step. So they speak the check digits, they're hearing the instructions of how many to pick, their eyes are free and their hands are free, so they reach into the pick slot and pick whatever number of cases they needed to pick to put on the pallet, and then they move on to the next step. And then the final one in a paper or label system is they have to read the next location, which means they have to relocate where they set down the paper or the labels, look at that again and start traveling. And that's still one step in the voice world, except for it's going to be a lot more seamless because there is no paper or a set of labels to locate. So periodically during a shift, you've got to travel to an assignment point. You might have to go get new labels or find the list. You might have to travel to the desk to reconcile discrepancies. There might be some data entry at some point. All those things are eliminated when you move to a voice solution. So the net of that is you're going to reduce errors significantly. You're going to increase productivity 15 to 25%. And then, as I mentioned before, your training time is going to be reduced probably by 50% or more. The other nice part about training on voice or just using voice in a distribution center in general is people don't necessarily need to be given a tour or learn where everything is within the DC, because voice is going to direct them to exactly what slot location to go to. So that cuts down on a lot of that time associated with familiarity and learning the DC. So why is voice a preferred technology? Well, there's a few reasons for that. These tend to be the things that drive satisfaction, not only with end users, but also for the companies that invest in voice. So the first one is that the workers perform more accurately and with greater productivity than they did on whatever system they're coming from. So you will actually get a measurable return on your technology investment. Almost all the people who deploy Vocalec Voice see a return in 9 months or less. And then I haven't personally seen a customer who deployed voice that actually took longer than 12 months. So all the deployments I've seen in my 8 years have always been 12 months or less of a full payback. Another reason is that it supports a peak workforce situation very cost effectively. So those of you in the beer, wine, spirits, carbonated beverage industry in North America, we all know that we've got some different peak seasons that go on. Summertime certainly for beer distribution. Peak holidays like Memorial Day, 4th of July, Thanksgiving and Christmas. And you might actually find yourselves in today's world adding additional staff. Once you go to voice, I think you're going to find you're not going to need to do that anymore because of the increase in performance that you get from a voice-driven system. And then finally, you're going to get reduced training time. So today it probably takes you, a number of days, if not a number of weeks, in order to get people comfortable on your paper or RF system. With voice, usually by the 3rd day of the deployment, someone on a voice system knows the system fully, has become very good at the system, and will start hitting some peak picking times faster than they've ever hit before using other technologies. So that's all around the accuracy and the greater productivity. Another nice satisfaction driver, another thing you'll get from voice, is that it's highly configurable for various demands. So it's scalable from one worker all the way up to hundreds of workers. It's completely adaptable to your workforce. And then the other thing is it's completely flexible in terms of changes you might make to the layout of your facility or to any SKUs you might add. So all those things, don't even phase a voice system. It's just all part of the deal. Then the final thing I'll talk about is that it reduces operating risks for you. So there's less risk in deploying Vocalec than any other voice solution in the marketplace. We've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of references just within the beverage industry itself. But the other part about reducing risk is that it improves safety as well as it leads to a very high worker satisfaction level. And what we found and what customers tell us is that those two things have resulted in lower cost for them because they've reduced any accidents they've had, but it also reduced their cost of training because they get a higher retention rate from their employees once they move to voice. Now, I mentioned earlier, not only the accuracy and the productivity, but I also made mention of the fact that ergonomically, there's a big benefit of going to voice. And these numbers prove out part of that. So about this time a year ago, a company called Supply Chain Insights did a completely independent study of voice users and also non-voice users. And when I say voice users, these weren't just people using Vocalect Voice. They were people using all voice solutions across the board. And what they found is that of the people who participated in the survey, 81% of the people who are using voice as a solution are actually satisfied with their warehouse operations, as compared to only 34% of people who are not using voice were satisfied. So I don't think it's a big stretch to say that if you're using RF for picking or using paper and labels for picking, you probably fall into that 34% group. So that spread is your opportunity to not only improve your operation, but do things that will lead to a much more satisfied workforce that will result in much better throughput for your facility. Now, one of the biggest questions I get oftentimes from people who aren't deploying voice is, we hear that it is scalable, but we've also heard that voice is only a solution for the very biggest distribution centers in the country. And you can see from this chart that's actually not the case for Vocalect. As of November of last quarter, November 2013, almost 50% of all the people who use Vocalect Voice have 20 or fewer users. And I know for beer, wine, spirits, and beverage, that's probably virtually all of you have 20 or fewer users. So this is right in our wheelhouse of the number of people who typically do deploy voice. Next thing I get questioned about is, will voice work in the language spoken in my DC? And the answer is absolutely. So out of the box, Vocalect supports more than 35 different languages. But in reality, we actually support an infinite number of languages. And so following this webinar, Chuck's going to send you some more information for some links you can see, including a video of a worker who's actually listening to the work in English, but speaking back to the system in Spanish. And the reason why I said that Vocalect Voice actually works in an infinite number of languages is under that exact scenario. Because each worker actually records their own voice template. So what I mean by that is if the system says to them the number 1 and they speak back uno as a response to that, is in fact the recorded response for that particular worker, and that's the expected response. So they can speak back to the system in whatever their native language is. In fact, they're comfortable listening, in English. But once again, we have the system going in both directions. So we also have Spanish-speaking systems, which they would repeat, back in Spanish if that's what they chose to do. In terms of people and industries that use voice, obviously you're primarily interested in beverage, beer, and spirits. But as you can see from this list, we've got people in grocery, food service, automotive parts. Just about every warehouse application you can think of is using some form of Vocalect Voice today. Next question you might have is, where would I use voice? I would tell you the most logical place to start is going to be in your pick operation. So case pick, or in your case for beer wine, is going to be primarily it. So case pick to pallet. And part of the reason is that's where the majority of your labor is. That's also where the majority of the work is. So that provides you the biggest opportunity to increase your throughput and also decrease the errors. That said, there's other opportunities that you might use voice for, including put away and replan. You might also decide to use it for cycle counting. And we've got customers that are using every single one of these in this chart in some way, shape, or form using Vocalect Voice. Now, I mentioned quite a few times training. So one of the things I wanted to show you was one of the ways that we've made training very, very simple for you as well as for your workers. And I think we're the only people in the industry that have a solution like this. So we developed an application called Rapid Start as complementary to our voice system. So a worker would actually put on their headset, they would put on their terminal, and then they can use any browser-based device, be it a tablet or a phone-type device. And what happens is Rapid Start walks their user through the equipment they're wearing, how to use that equipment, and it walks them all the way through the training of that voice template I mentioned earlier. So a couple of things for you. It makes it a lot more fun to do this training, but it's also a way to streamline your operation and to take costs out of the training as well, because now you don't have to have a supervisor walking through step by step a brand new user on how to do voice. They can be, given a tablet, or they can even use their own, phone, whether it's an iPhone or an Android-based device, to do this training. And that saves you quite a bit of time in terms of supervisor, uptime. So that's one of the ways that we've actually, helped out with the training and decreased the time it takes. And it also enables you to provide a very consistent training experience for every single worker across the board. So now you've seen a little bit about Vocalec Voice. I've given you some examples of the payback, and I've even told you that you can achieve that payback in 12 months or less, in most cases 9 months or less. So what I wanted to do is walk you through very quickly a very high-level kind of payback scenario, if you will, so that you can have some more data on how that payback would look for you. So if you had 20 selectors or pickers running a couple of shifts a day, picking 180 cases with labels today, and you had a current error rate of 2 per 1,000, which is pretty typical of what we see, and then a labor rate of around $17, that's the scenario I'm going to talk about. So first we're going to talk about how to improve your accuracy, or how voice will do that. So based on that data I just covered, your current accuracy rate is 99.82. And based on those pick rates, you pick about 27,000 cases a day, times 260 working days a year, times that 0.18 error rate that we talked about, which means that you make about 12,636 errors per year picking with labels or paper. So conservatively, we're going to say that we're going to move you from 99.82 up to 99.92. So we're going to cut your errors down. So essentially, you're going to make 7,000 fewer errors than you made before. Now, for this exercise, I'm actually using $40 as the error rate. So you may think that's a high scenario. You may think that's a low scenario. The number that I can give you is that about 10 years ago, the Food Marketing Institute did a survey of a lot of their constituents on the cost of an error. So grocers, of course, have close to 50,000 SKUs as opposed to, say, the beer wine industry, which may have 1,000 or fewer. And in grocery, there's quite a few very low-cost SKUs. So what FMI learned was that the cost of an error was worth about $100. So that included the labor that handled the error, the transportation costs involved in the error, the clerical staff needed in terms of correcting the error. So I would say for my $40 here, I think is a pretty safe bet, because for the beer wine industry, the cost of an error, especially if you have a bottle pick operation for wine, would be significantly more than 40. So we're going to go with that for this exercise, and I'll show you how that plays out in a moment. So that was what happens to reduce the errors. Now let's talk about what happens to improve the productivity. So we determined that your current productivity level was 180 cases. You had the 20 FTEs at essentially $17 as their wage rate, times 2,080 hours a year, which is 40 hours a week, 50 weeks out of the year. So your labor rate is about $702,000 a year. We're actually going to once again take a conservative approach, and we're only going to bump your productivity up by 10%. Keeping in mind that I said before we typically see 15 to 25% as an improvement in productivity. So we're going to go up to 10%, which means that you're going to go from 180 cases picked per hour to 198 cases picked, which means that you could actually reduce the labor from 20 down to 18. So your future labor cost is going to be $632,432 as opposed to the $702 you're at currently. So what does all that mean? Well, once again, I'm going to give you some high-level figures for this calculation. We're going to say that the system costs $200,000 for your 20 pickers. You're going to save $280,000 in accuracy improvement. You're going to save $63,000 in productivity improvement for a total of $344,618 in savings. So when you take that and you do the net present value calculation, what you find out is you got a simple payback of 7 months on this particular system cost of $200,000. So then you're probably asking yourself, well, he lowballed the system cost. And I will tell you that once again, I was conservative. I would hope that Heartland Computer can sell you a system at full price, because it certainly will justify it. But $200,000 would be the max payout for a 20-user system. So chances are your payback's actually going to be better than the 7 months that I'm showing you. So that's a quick ROI example. So from there, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the equipment. That's kind of the last thing we ever talk to you about once we do the other things we talked about, which is walking through your distribution center, learning about your operation, helping you address, your most important problems. But in addition to having the leading software out there for voice, we also make purpose-built terminals as well as purpose-built headsets that are made for industrial environments, very, very rugged, and they've been optimized for the best voice accuracy possible. So what you see in the upper left-hand corner is our new SRX2 wireless headset. It's a very lightweight headset. You can actually see that the headband separates from the actual appliance itself. So that enables you, if you run multiple shifts, to make one investment in the appliance and then additional investments in the headbands. And the headbands are about $15 or $20 a pop. So that, once again, helps bring your costs down. And then the 3 devices that you see are our newest, latest, greatest TalkMan devices. The A710, which is the one in the upper right-hand corner, is probably the one that makes the most sense for beer wine distribution. But we also make an A730 that has an integrated scanner, if in fact there is part of your operation that needs to do the occasional scan. And then the device in the bottom right-hand corner, the A720, is going to be released very, very soon in the April-May timeframe of 2014. And it has those 2 little rings on the end, and those are to enable the connection to a wired device. So I've mentioned put away and replan as an example. So if you use a wired long-range scanner in your put away and replan operation, you could actually integrate the current use of that scanner in with voice, because voice and scanning are completely a solution that we can do together. So that's the typical setup of what we'd recommend for someone to beer wine, the headset you see on the left, as well as the terminal that you see in the upper right-hand corner. And so that's the equipment. So I guess I'll kind of wrap it up at this point. And once again, remind you that when Vocalec works with Heartland Computer, with Mountain Leverage, once again, the goal is to understand your process to help you optimize your operation, provide you with the best ergonomic solution possible, and then make sure that you're going to get the information you need to make the right business decisions on a go-forward basis. So with that, Chuck, I will turn it back over to you.
Hey, Jay, thank you again, and thank you, everyone, for coming on board and taking some time out. I'd like to, answer any questions that anyone might have, but the best way to do that is probably just give me a call at 866-708-7225 or Chuck at heartland-usa.com. Again, I want to thank Alex Runneman and Jay Blinderman from Vocalec for their presentation today, and look forward to working with all the distributors on taking costs out of the system and making voice a big part of their warehouse. With that, I wish you all a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.